Good day and welcome to the PSS program training. My name is Latanya Dubois. I'm the Operations and HR Consultant, and I'll be assisting you with this program training as we move through the process today. Let me start off by saying thank you for looking at the orientation. By this time, you would have already reviewed the orientation, and our first slides will just go over a couple of things. Again, welcome to VOICE. We're glad to have you on the team. Our agency is very focused on bringing specialized, skilled individuals to our team. So one of the things that we want to highlight is we appreciate the gifts and talents that you are bringing to our team as well as to our peers. As you saw in orientation, we continuously do research, direct service development, and training and education to the community and individuals to ensure that people know what type of services we offer, as well as how we go through the process of identifying new services to provide. By now, you would have already completed all your required trainings. Here is a slide that just gives us some information about the trainings that would have happened by now. If you have not done any of the training, as you can see, the second one is the PSS 101. That is the training that we're doing right now. So disregard that online integrity test. You will get a test after this class here that will allow you to examine all that you have learned in this particular segment. As peer support specialists, one of the requirements that we have to maintain is clinical supervision. As part of our regular practices, our operational practices, we do it in 3 different ways. The first one is in individual supervision, where we require once a month face-to-face and or minimum on Zoom. That is in a special situation. It's just once a month that we get to see you. We schedule that session pretty much early on in your employment process so that we can know what day and time is your regular scheduled one-on-one monthly visit. Then we have group supervision every Wednesday from 10 to 11:30. Typically that's online, but we know that at least once a month, typically the last week of the month, we meet face-to-face at the corporate office in Raleigh. And then our last one is team meeting. The team meeting is a quarterly meeting where all of the PSS staff and possibly other staff that's in the agency, like TCM or administrative staff, will come together just to meet and discuss any upcoming events or things that's going on in the agency, as well as celebrate milestones and other things in our team. Just a friendly reminder of our mantra, the 5 C's: compliance, competency, communication, care, and compassion. Next, we try to give just a definitive peer support definition that we use at the agency. The definition has been used over the course of about 6 to 7 years that we've been using this definition, which is peer support is emotional and practical support between 2 people who share common experience such as mental health challenge or illness. A peer supporter has lived through that similar experience and is trained to support others. Now, here is where we want you to look in your folder that you received, and you will be pulling out the document that is named NC Medicaid Peer Support Services. This is our clinical coverage policy number 8G. I'm going to go over a few pages that you would have to review in order to highlight some of the things that you see on this slide, just as a review of the service definition. Yes, we do expect that you will spend some time with this document reading through it to make sure you thoroughly understand the clinical coverage policy. We are available to you, though, ongoing to make sure that you have access to any questions or concerns that you have with the supervision team. This is where it would be great for you to bring questions or concerns to our team meetings, as well as just bringing it to your one-on-one. Now, if you start right on page 1, you will see that you'll be at the description of the procedure, product, or service, which is peer support services. And we just want to highlight for you that peer support services are an evidence-based mental health model of care that provides community-based recovery services directly to a Medicaid-eligible adult beneficiary diagnosed with a mental health or substance use disorder. PSS provides structured, scheduled services that promote recovery, self-determination, self-advocacy, engagement in self-care and wellness, and enhancement of community living skills of beneficiaries. So read along in the rest of that part 1 or 1.0 to get a better understanding, but we highlight that this is a structured, evidence-based mental health program, and we want to make sure that what we do with our peers are well thought out strategies alongside the peer to make sure that we're meeting the goals that they have for themselves. As you read through page 1, you will see that there is 4 categories that peer support service delivery should, at least the structured services should look like. So part A says peer mentoring or coaching 101. On page 2, it talks about recovery resource connecting. That's B. C is skill building recovery groups. D is building community. And then you'll see some definitions: recovery, self-determination, self-advocacy, health, and community. In this part 1 is basically giving you language that will help you to understand the services that you're providing to your peer. It'll also highlight for you what is the typical service that a peer support specialist will be providing to their peer. So take your time and read through this, and as you prepare to begin to write notes, look at the language that is being used in this section, because it will be a great tool to help you stay peer support relevant. We ask that you read the whole document, but for the purpose of this training, we highlight specific sections, and the next section we'll be highlighting is section 3.0. When the procedure, product, or service is covered. This section basically goes through the covered sessions that you will be able to provide. And if you turn to page 5, 3.1.2 talks about telephonic services. And this is a selected service that talks about when we use the telephone or any audio-only communication method. There's a range of information that you would need to make sure you are aware of or go through with your peer to ensure that you are being in compliance with this part of the policy. You will see more information about what that telephonic service includes on page 6. Before we get to that, though, you will see 3.2.3 continue state criteria, and you should be working alongside me in your clinical coverage policy document to review the continued state criteria. This is basically talking about when we decide to continue to work with the peer. So every 3 months, we do a recertification or reauthorization, rather, of the peer's hours. After 3 months, the peer usually gets a PCP update to ensure that they still need the service. And the peer support specialist is usually part of the team that discusses the process or progress the peer has been making over those 3 months. The continued state criteria is specifically asking you to consider 3 points. Did the desired level or outcome of functioning, has it been restored, improved, or sustained over time? Or the beneficiary continues to be at risk for relapse based on clinical assessment or history? Is the continuation of service supported by the documentation of the beneficiary's progress towards their goal, which we'll talk more about in the progress note training? But in this sense, these 3 sections tell you to ask yourself, as you are working with this peer, does it make sense to continue to do another 3 months at least to explore what we can do to help the peer meet their goals? The next section is 3.2.4, which is talking about transition and discharge criteria. Again, this is an excellent opportunity to take a moment and look at your peers' progress to see if it's time to either transition them to a different program or just close them out as completion and discharge them from the program. They give you 4 examples of when that is the case. A talks about the beneficiary's level of functioning. B talks about the beneficiary if they've achieved positive life outcomes that they've set for themselves and no longer need the service. C talks about the beneficiaries not making any progress or is regressing, and it doesn't seem like they're ready to do services, and they may need more intensive services. And D talks about the beneficiary choosing to withdraw from peer support services, or the legally responsible person, like the guardian, has requested that they withdraw from the service. These are areas that you want to keep in mind. The next part of that is where they break down those telephonic specific criteria, which is 3.2.5. And if you read through A through F, it gives you a set of standards that you want to look for, making sure the peer feels safe and can effectively deliver the service over the phone. Like they navigate the phone well. If you're talking them through some steps, they're able to hear you. They're in a space where they can talk comfortably, things to that nature. You also want to make sure that the person is in a safe environment where they're not at risk of being harmed should they talk about anything that may be relevant to their day-to-day needs in that moment. You also want to make sure that in situations where a caregiver or facilitator is necessary, that has taken place. And with the delivery of services through telehealth, their ability to assist in their safety should always be considered. So again, read through most of this because we also want to obtain and document any verbal or written consent that they give when we're on the phone with them. The next sections that you read, you would also do G and H just on page 7 to make sure you cover all the telephonic needs. The next section, which is on page 7, is 4.0, which talks about what is not covered. And if you take your time and pay attention to 4.2, there's a list of things that we cannot do as a peer support specialist specifically that will be outside of the purview of the peer support role. So take your time and read through that and ensure that you understand that there are sections in here that may have more explanation. And if that is the case, you would always be able to talk to your supervisor to be able to get clarity. Moving along to page 10, you will see, now again, these are the areas that we want you to highlight, but it doesn't mean we don't want you to review the whole document. Some of these areas are more appropriate for the QP or qualified professional or the supervisor of the program or manager to review documentation before the person gets assigned to you, but it's good to know what is happening in the program. So do your due diligence and read through the document thoroughly. The next section that I would like to highlight for you is section 6.2, which is on page 10. And this section talks about provider certifications. It helps you to understand what the peer support supervisor is able to do or should be doing or how they qualify for that role. And it also talks about the CPSS role. And it gives you a good snapshot of the duties and abilities the peer support specialist should demonstrate. This is very close to what you've signed as your job description. So take a moment just to see again what is lined up for you in this section. And keep in mind that in the design of the program, as a peer support specialist, the staff ratios are QP to CPSS is 1:8, meaning for every QP we have, they can supervise up to 6 PSS full time. For CPSS to beneficiary, you would be working with up to 15 peers at a time. That is the max that we're able to assign to you according to this clinical care policy. The next section that should have your attention at this moment is page 13, which talks about the training requirements. Every year, you should be getting at least 10 years of hours of training in the mental health and substance use realm. And we would like for you to make sure that you're sharing your certificates of completion with our agency to keep your file up to date and to be in compliance with this clinical coverage policy. In addition, you will see that in the initial setup of your business, of your connection with our agency, there are trainings that we have to provide to you, including this policy review component and an hour of documentation training. So this is why it's important that in the first 30 days, you get to really know the clinical policy, the clinical coverage policy, so that you're familiar with the expectations. Up next on page 14, you will see the expected outcomes. This is an excellent way for you to understand what are some of the things they would like to see this peer that you're assigned to exhibiting upon completion of the program. And this is assuming that the peer goes all the way through the program, does all the things that they plan to achieve in their person-centered plan, and they have documented such. You have documented such. So A through K outlines some of the behaviors or outcomes we may see from the peer as they graduate from the program. This will conclude the clinical coverage policy review part. And it would be great if you would continue to point your attention to the screen so that you can see the next part. For the Code of Ethics, this is just a general reminder that you are a certified peer support specialist that is governed by the Code of Ethics. What we like to do is at this time highlight a couple of them that we want you to pay special attention to. You will see those bolded on the screen at this point. Please take a moment, pause the screen, and take a look at the ones that we have highlighted. The ones that are highlighted in bold are the ones that people typically seem to have the most challenge with, and it has cost them either their job or their certification at the agency. So please take your time in servicing your peers as well as governing yourself as a peer support specialist to do good due diligence, to have self-recovery as your primary duty, right? Making sure that you're taken care of and you're taking care of your personal responsibilities and seeking support where needed. As you move through this process of being a peer support specialist with the agency, it can get pretty challenging, but we want you to remember that you have a responsibility to support people to use their own voices. You want to always treat people with dignity, self-determination, and empowerment. You want to make sure that you are committed to your peers. And if you find that you have a challenge with doing so, let us know. The other ones here listed are pretty self-explanatory, but again, in the interest of time, since you're looking through this and reading these things on your own and can pause and save and take pictures and do whatever it is that you need to do in your learning process, please just take that time in this moment to read through it and make note of any questions you may want to bring to the next team meeting. Up next is fraud, waste, and abuse. The policy of VOICE is a no tolerance policy. How we were trained by our MCO or the managed care organization that we're contracted with to do peer support services is if we suspect that there is fraud, we do not want to wait till they come to see if there's been fraud happening in the agency. Instead, we are doing our due diligence to check regularly to assure that we are not supporting any fraudulent behavior, as well as doing anything that includes waste or abuse. How will we know? Well, as you know, fraud is documenting anything that you did not do. And that's where we want to start from the door. If you didn't do it, do not write it down that you did. It's just plain and simple as that. We want to also make sure that when the person says that they're going to do something, it shouldn't be documented until you actually completed the service. You also don't want to omit anything that happened in the session if it is something that is within the billable realm of the service, or if it is something that's important to the progress of the peer. As far as waste, if you overutilize the services, it can deem you as being wasteful of the person's hours. So for example, if they have 5 hours a week and you consistently bill 8 to 10 hours a week, which is not allowed in our agency because we only bill 5 hours a week max each week per peer, at this time, you want to make sure that you are documenting what it is that you plan to do with the peer in the hours that you have available. And this should be discussed with the peer on a regular basis to ensure that they understand how many hours they have to work with you and you work within that category, in that time frame. If there is an additional need, you can always come and talk to your supervisor to ensure that the hours are managed correctly. Now, keep in mind, you have 90 days to use the lot of units that you are assigned to this peer. However, it is set up so that you can do it week to week. If something changes, you need to be talking to the QP or the supervisor to ensure that you're following policy and you're not in violation of any waste behaviors. The last one is abuse. When it comes to abuse, when it says when something is done differently than is considered accepted practice, a perfect example of this is when a peer is, you have a group of clients that are peers that are assigned to your caseload, and you have a couple of peers that are not as active as other peers, and you choose to just call on the peer that is more active because you want to make your hours. That is considered abuse. Every peer deserves the allotted attention needed to engage them in services, even the ones that are not excited about contacting you every day and following through with all the activities. They're still learning to trust you and create rapport. Doesn't mean you get to just bill on them when they're not engaged in services. So if you're doing any research or if you're doing any follow-up, you need to make sure that you've done all your due diligence to include the peer in that plan before you bill on them. You also don't want to bill in lieu of not being able to see them unless it is a structured strategy to try to engage them back into services. And we can always talk about that more in trainings or other supervision sessions. The team behind the team. In your workbook, you will find a page that outlines the highlighted person that you are expected to make contact with. You also have a who to call when sheet in your folder. If you look on the right-hand side and find your when to call, who to call sheet, that will break down the individuals who are responsible for providing specific activities as far as operations and supervision in the agency. You will also find this probably around page 15 to 16 in your PSS training workbook to be able to identify the emails that coincide with what's on that who to call when. Please refer to that document when you need to get clarity about a question or concern and you want to know who you should be speaking to. Up next, we will move into your administrative duties. These include a couple of things that is going to be required of you regularly. The creation of a calendar in our integrity, which is also called checkpoint system, is our billing system that allows us to see that you have given some thought to how you're going to provide services to your caseload by way of putting your schedule together for the following week. Every Friday at 3 p.m., your calendar should be completed in integrity. The supervisor will check to make sure that the documentation is completed. It will include all the activities you anticipate completing as the week goes by for the following week. This will also allow you to track your hours and manage your schedule so that you can submit it regularly. We must prioritize our organization to support our peers because these caseloads are very difficult to manage if you're not organized. The calendar feature in Integrity helps you track your schedule, but it also sends reminders to your peers. So why not take advantage of technology that can support you? Each week, on Mondays or Sundays, I don't know how your schedule will work, but it's really up to you. You want to start off your week by checking your authorization hours. We will go through great detail when you're in supervision face-to-face for training this week or the week after, depending on how your training schedule is set up, to show you exactly how to check for authorization hours weekly in the integrity system. If there's no changes, you can just continue to bill accordingly up to those 5 hours. But if you see that there's any waste or abuse that is occurring, you want to go ahead and speak to your supervisor about what could possibly be done to help you ensure that you don't go over their hours or if you don't underutilize the hours, because that's also a form of waste for the service, and you want to make sure that you're in compliance in any way possible. If you need assistance with trying to come up with this strategy, that's what the supervisor is there for. We're there to coach you along and ensure that you're providing excellent service day to day. The last thing is when you go to check your schedule and your authorization hours, you should also be checking check the docs and dates report. That's another document that we will show you in our face-to-face supervision training sessions, where you can learn how to use the reports in integrity to help you to see if any docs or dates are expiring. These are usually done once a month and they're scheduled out anywhere from 30 days to 45 days before expiration so that you can ensure that there is nothing that can cause impact to your billing. Remember, you'll be able to see this on your CP Central alert, which you will have learned about by the time you read this, to ensure that you know where to go to see if there's any challenges or issues with documentation or hours for your peer. In order to review your authorization hours, here are the steps. You can pause this page and just take a look. But in integrity, you would run this weekly and it will help you to see what the billable week looks like. So as we see here on this slide, The weekly billable, the Medicaid billable weeks is Sunday to Saturday. Some of you will be working on weekends depending on the schedule you have agreed to work on. And our full-time staff is usually 35 hours, and our part-time staff is anywhere from 15 to 25 hours a week. So when you're scheduling yourself out each week, you will be looking at your authorization hours to ensure that you have enough time and enough coordination to meet up with the peers and any other contributing provider to ensure that the person is receiving comprehensive care. Remember, let's take a pause here and just write down any questions that you may have. The disadvantage of having this as a video is that people forget that we are still human beings on the other side of this video, and we're looking forward to hearing any questions or concerns or thoughts you may have. So take a moment and just double back and see if there's anything that you may want to make a note of to bring to the meeting. Our next slide talks about reviewing and calculating your billable hours. On this slide, you will see, once you run the author report, you will see several items that you'll need to pay attention to. There are a couple of color-coded areas that you want to make sure that you are paying attention to as well, because these areas will highlight whether there's something you need to take care of in a couple of weeks versus something you need to take care of right away, as well as if the person is doing fine. So anything that's red or yellow, as you can see from this slide, is something that requires attention. If you remember nothing else from this slide or this training, if you see something that's red or yellow, immediately go to your supervisor or your Michelle in our administrative office to confirm what the need may be. Because once we understand what that red or yellow means, we can get the proper document into place so that that person can continue to receive services. Any delay in doing so can lead to a negative financial impact, and we do not want to do that, and we do not want to hinder services on the basis of paperwork, because that would be totally against the Mental Health Parity Act. So we just want to make sure everything goes through smoothly and that we have plenty of time to follow up with our peers so we can continue offering services. The last section talks about formulating your hours. So that takes a specific calculation. And as you can see, the formula is the number of hours remaining divided by the number of weeks remaining divided by 4. So when we're looking at our integrity report, that was on the previous slide that we'll talk about face-to-face in your training, you'll see that there's a group of numbers that you'll be able to look at called units. And when you're looking at those units, the whole idea is to convert those units into hours so that you can see how many hours this peer has available to you week to week. Some peers have as little as 2 hours a week to work with them, and some have as many as 5. Your best opportunity to service them with excellence and comprehension is to be able to sit down and figure out your hours and ensure that you have scheduled yourself weekly to provide the dosage, so to speak, with quotes that you can't see me doing, to explain what it is that you're going to do with the peer. So we want to make sure that they get the full allotment of what they're entitled to. If you have any questions about this, we'll be going over this in person, and you can ask questions then. Please make note. There is a small example there, but we'll talk more about that soon. Next up is timesheets. So VOICE uses timesheets.com. By now, you would have already been logged into that system, and you will note that the employee time is also tracked in integrity. The integrity system keeps up with the progress notes and how many hours you spend working with your peer. And then this timesheet system keeps up with any trainings or supervisions or groups or one-on-one sessions that you've had with your supervisor. So in doing so, you would be able to go into the timesheets system and document the hours you've spent with us. Of course, this has already been conducted by way of our face-to-face training, but this goes as a reminder to show you that inputting your notes will track your hours that you get paid for, as far as the hours of service delivery as it relates to your peer support peer support caseload. And then the other part is the timesheets part that will allocate for any trainings or special meetings that you've had during the payroll period. These hours worked have to be on a consistent basis. So in order for you to qualify for full-time employee benefits, you have to be working full-time. That means hitting your 35 hours a week every week to ensure that you are considered a full-time employee. Emails, integrity, passwords, oh my. So if you look here, by this time, you would have already received your checkpoint integrity password and username, as well as your voice email password and username. Please govern yourself accordingly to document that information in a place where you can easily access it, because these two passwords and usernames do not change. So if something happens where you're locked out or you can't do something, you probably have to log all the way out, close your computer or close a browser, restart it just to get back in, because they stay the same. However, if there is an issue with your checkpoint integrity password or access to integrity, you can feel free to call me, Latanya, or Michelle in the office, and we can assist you with resetting that. It will still be the same username and password, but we will help you with clarifying those things. As it relates to the email from Voice, you will contact Dr. Kimmy. She is the person that is directly responsible for email setup at this time. So once you have any challenges with getting into the email, remember this information does not change, but if for some reason you cannot access it, you can feel free to call her. Next up will be the use of the integrity system, which we're going to be doing face to face. And then afterward, to set your expectations, we will be doing progress note development and review. Our final training in person will be with the PCP updates, looking at documentations such as the comprehensive clinical assessment, the CCA, and the crisis plan. This gives you a full picture of the way that the peer entered the program and things that was reported during the time of enrollment. And it also gives you a sense of what they said at that time that they wanted to focus on. This concludes the onboarding part and orientation part of your training as it relates to videos. You will have an attached link to take a quiz on the information you received. So I hope you were taking good notes. It's been a pleasure providing this information to you, and I look forward to seeing you in real time in person. Have a great day.